Isn't it good to know that no matter where you are, you're covered? Covered by a company owned by Pensentions that understands your unique insurance needs. At Metrosint General Insurance Company, we've invested 50 years of service to guarantee that you have the peace of mind that you deserve. When it comes to motor vehicle, property, employer's liability, business insurance, and much more, we've got you covered. Our professional and friendly staff understands your needs and ensures you understand your options. Metrosint General Insurance Company.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of Let's Get Down to Business. We're doing the profile edition this evening, and my guest is Miss Benarva Browne, who you will meet when we come back from the break.
Isn't it good to know that no matter where you are, you're covered? Covered by a company owned by Pensentions that understands your unique insurance needs. At Metrosint General Insurance Company, we've invested 50 years of service to guarantee that you have the peace of mind that you deserve. When it comes to motor vehicle, property, employer's liability, business insurance, and much more, we've got you covered. Our professional and friendly staff understands your needs and ensures you understand your options. Metrosint General Insurance Company.
Welcome back. I am chatting this evening with Miss Benarva Browne. She's a town and country planning consultant, and it's a pleasure to have you here, Benarva.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
So we're going to talk a bit about you, the person, and I want to spend a lot of time talking about what you do, because I think the profession that you're engaged in, touches a lot of relevant stuff in today's living. So I don't want to use up the hour just talking about Benarva.
Okay.
I can easily do that too, eh? So a bit about you. One of the things I learned about you is that you're the recipient of remind me?
The Hubert Humphrey Fellowship.
Hubert Humphrey Fellowship. What is that?
Well, it's a program sponsored by the State Department, the U.S. State Department, that it's supposed to attract professionals, mid-level professionals who they see leadership ability in, and you go and you study in an American institution for a year, and you immerse yourself within the institution. It's a non-degree program, but you have the opportunity to attend classes, pursue studies that you're interested in, and you also have to do about 200 hours of work placement within the American company or different organization in the US.
And the particular institution that you went to was MIT.
Yes.
So that's a very prestigious university.
Yes, it's one of the best in the world.
Yes, especially, well, obviously in the field of technology in particular. What was your experience like there, Benarva?
It was really good. It was weird because of the COVID pandemic. We did everything virtually, but it was a very good experience. I was able to network and meet with a lot of key individuals who are making and innovators who are making an impact and studying in particular fields and different interests. It was very interesting. I got to also meet different fellows from around the world. So we got to share our experiences, we got to see the differences, the similarities, and we learned from each other, as well as learning from our professors, other students at MIT, and other guest speakers and organizations who we were lucky to interact with at MIT.
So it sounds like rarefied air because you're in this club that is like, certainly I couldn't get into it, but a select group, an elite group of people based on just raw brain talent and potential that you have for changing life, changing the world.
Yeah, and it has a lot to do on what would have been my past experiences, the projects that I would have worked on, and the initiatives that I would have worked on. They helped to get me there. So, yeah, it was a very interesting experience and very life-changing.
Let's roll back to how you got that award. You were something before, obviously. You were town and country planner. Is that the profession?
No, I'm a town and country planning consultant.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the field of study that you did. So where did you go to qualify in that?
Oh, I went to England. I attended the University of West England. That's in Bristol, where I did a 4-year program. Now, 3 years would have been my bachelor's, and then I got a master's in planning degree after completing my 4th year. Yeah.
I mean, you're rolling this thing off as if, well, it was all easily achievable, but I'm sure you had some challenges, Benarva.
Yes, I did have challenges. I had challenges, but in retrospect, the challenges made me stronger and helped to build a greater person, and to even the challenges that I face today, I now view them as that building blocks
So
for the
that
bigger and
experience
better.
was character building.
Yes, it's a lot of character building. It was a lot of character building experience. But there were definitely a few challenges there, and I'm sure we're going to get into it as we
Well,
speak.
let's talk a little bit about that, because you mentioned England, and it's not the same culture as the Caribbean.
No, it's not.
So-
Everything about England is completely different from the Caribbean. The weather was something that was like a bit, you always hear about the English weather, but to actually live in it for all those years, it was a bit of a drag. But you got around it. The culture, the way how the English operate is very different from the whole.
And this was your
society.
first exposure to that sort of thing.
No, it
Also living in it.
Yeah, well, to living in it, but I would have visited before and I would have had a glimpse of it. But to have a glimpse and be totally immersed in a society is a totally different thing. Yeah.
What about the experience, the living experience there that stands out? The experience that made you happy and the ones that made you want to come home?
Well, the weather would have probably driven me home the fastest. The experiences that made it happy to be there. I was lucky enough that I created a community around me. So although I was in England, I had enough West Indians and even Vincentians around me that I maintained that kind of Caribbean club. There, I had instances where you totally miss home and you're far away and you saw things are happening in St. Vincent and you try to balance both. I'm sure anyone or any student who would have studied recently, they have that same experience where you're totally missing home. Some of the experiences that made it worthwhile. While I was there, I was able to travel a lot because of my study. The field that I'm in, town and country planning or urban and regional planning.
And this is traveling within Great Britain.
And Europe as well.
And Europe, okay.
Yeah, so we would have done school trips. So we would have done school trips to different cities within England to learn of the problems they were having, some of the innovative solutions. We would have then explored European cities like Paris, Barcelona. I went to Rotterdam, sorry.
Right.
So, but it was very interesting to see some of the ideas that they had going for them. And the way that they were thinking about placemaking.
Right. So it was all part and parcel of the field that you were studying. These were like field trips then?
Yeah, these were field trips. These were field trips. Most were guided by some. A lecturer would tell you what should be the learning outcome of you going there. So you know what were your activities, what you were expected to do, what you expected to look at, that kind of thing. And you asked about the things that made England memorable for me. One of the things I did in England, or at the time we were allowed to do, we were allowed to work a certain amount of time, hours a week, to get some extra income.
Right.
And I jumped at the opportunity to become a mentor, a tutor and mentor,
Right.
with a program that was targeting Black and ethnic minorities, inner city youths in schools. So I would have worked with them about raising their
Self-esteem, things like that.
self-esteem and even their aspiration levels. Because what the program recognized is that less and less ethnic minorities were making it into university and tertiary education. So we went there, we explained the differences between what's a job and what's a career. And they saw the example within us, because you'd have some students who were there who had just recently moved from the Caribbean, and they're senior Caribbean students in university. So we became role models for them.
Excellent.
Yeah.
You see some similarities. We're going to get back to what made you unhappy, yeah? But because I want to talk about racism. But as you talk about inner city youths and the mentoring program with them, do you see similarities here with the same sorts of exposure that these youths, or the what makes them at risk of falling through the cracks or not achieving as much as they really could? Do you see similar things here with the age groups that you're dealing with in the UK?
Yes, you see things, and it just has to do. I mean, at the end of the day, when you look at it, to be a youth in this day and age, it's not an easy task. I know sometimes we like to talk about our youths and all the bad that the youths are doing, but they have a lot to deal with. I mean, social media is a major distraction. That's something that I had a glimpse of it, but I don't have it as much as they have it now. The whole issue with be looking for someone to look up to in their community.
Correct.
Some of the issues you saw being brought out were like home issues, and the whole moving. I mean, to move countries in the middle of a school year, it can be quite challenging. And one of the saddest situations that I think I saw in the UK at that time, it was a student who just moved to England because of the crisis that was happening in Somalia.
Right.
She did not speak a word of English, but because of her age, she was placed in a class and told to
So
sit.
she was a refugee?
Yeah, she was a refugee. But she then had to deal with language, cultural barriers that were, it would seem insurmountable from her position. Yeah.
But people like that, you often hear good endings because they escape that sort of whatever human crisis that they're escaping from. They get into a place of great opportunity, but great challenges as well, like what you're identifying. And for some reason, all of that gets channeled into this success story at the end.
In some cases, or probably in the cases that are well promoted. But when you look into the whole makeup of the English society, you can see that becoming immigrants and their future generations, it takes a while in some instances, as you know, Vinciga said, to catch your hand and to make it work.
Right.
So when it does happen, you really have to applaud it, but it takes a lot of grit.
So that which we applaud is really the exception.
Yes.
Yeah. What about racism?
Oh, racism. That's an interesting one. When I first went to UWE, that was University of West England, and I was in the architecture and planning program. I was the lone Black female student within that program, and I was away from my family for the first time, and all of that. But
there was for you to assimilate. What age are we talking about there?
I would have been 18.
Wow.
Yes, and the racism, it was there, but it was something that I chose not to focus on, but it was definitely there. And I think what helped is that I found my squad.
Right.
I eventually found my Caribbean crew. I found my squad.
Right.
And I did that through working on the same program that I told you about. Because like there were other students who were like me. So we got to meet other Caribbean people. So we met other Caribbean people and other friends, just making friends around. I met an Antiguan who instantly became like my Caribbean bestie.
Right,
And
right.
we hit it off.
So I guess you sort of buffered the overt racism, if there was any.
There was, but you kind of have to grow thick skin.
Right.
And that helped me to grow thick skin. When you realize that someone just has a bias against you because of the color of your skin, which I can't change.
Yeah.
And this is not a situation that I would have dealt with in St. Vincent.
Correct.
But you just kind of, it affects you. And maybe I'm making light of it now because I've went through it. But it does affect you. And I can see how some people can be stunted by it. But you just have to kind of be tougher about it.
And there's a lot more conversation going on now, to be fair,
Yes.
about, the Black Lives Matter and all this sort of thing. Is a good thing because it's sensitizing the world, as it were, about differences in race in particular. And
with the whole race issue, it is sad to say, but as a student, as a Black student who would have gone to the US and even to England, you have to, as yourself, within yourself, you have to understand that it exists. And although it's not right, you have to just make sure that you are not harmed in the end of it.
Yeah. So you try to avoid the confrontations.
Yes, that's the way that I see it. I am probably... It's a pity that it exists, but you have to work around it.
Absolutely. And sometimes...
And you cannot let it be a roadblock.
Right. And sometimes the working around perpetuates, though, the ones who feel superior because they don't get confronted, you see? And so they think, well, they can carry on. We're at the end of our first segment of the program. So when we come back, we're going to chat a little bit more about your development and we're going to talk about your job. This is Let's Get Down to Business. My guest is Benarva Browne. More when we come back.
Keep calm. We're online now. Thousands of local content for your viewing pleasure. Live. Boom. IKTV. Tune in. Get interactive. Get involved with WhatsApp or Instagram. Interact live. Party from home. Subscribe, follow, send us your voice notes. Check us out on Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, or call us live in studio. Be where the world is going. Stay home and connect online. Boom 1069, IKTV. Join the evolution. It's all about you. Connect now.
Isn't it good to know that no matter where you are, you're covered? Covered by a company owned by Pensensions that understands your unique insurance needs. At Metrosint General Insurance Company, we've invested 50 years of service to guarantee that you have the peace of mind that you deserve. When it comes to motor vehicle, property, employer's liability, business insurance, and much more, we've got you covered. Our professional and friendly staff understands your needs and ensures you understand your options. Metrosint General Insurance Company.
You're looking at Let's Get Down to Business. My guest is Miss Benarva Browne. She is a town and country planning consultant. Benarva, the making of you, I took it from the fellowship that you got to your university. You had mentioned to me before we did this recording about a trip that you took to Austria. I think you were in secondary school then.
Yes, it was as part of it was a Global Young Leaders Program, GYLC.
Yeah.
Can't remember what year I went.
Yeah, but that seemed to have been a defining moment of your life.
Yes, it definitely was. We went to Austria. Well, my first experience with Austria, actually, I can take that back. It was actually a Girl Guides trip would have been the defining moment.
Yeah.
So when I was about to go into third form or fourth form, we went on an international camp.
Right.
And we were lucky enough to go to Austria.
Right.
And when it was announced, the trip was to Austria that year, everyone looked around and I was like, Austria? I really didn't know about Austria, didn't know much about it. But we all went. And when we got there, we arrived at night. Everything looks dark at night.
Right.
When we got into the cities and we got to see the place, I was absolutely starstruck. I was in love. Yes, I was in love just about the way that the streets were. I liked the way that people were eating on the sidewalks, because it was summer.
Sidewalk cafes.
Yeah, so there was sidewalks, cafes, and I'm like, look at this, and the use of the outdoor spaces. There were parks where they had checker tables on it, and people were playing games, and we were not someone. People, it was people of all ages, young kids, old men and women, and it just said like, this is amazing.
Looked like civilization to you.
Yes, I mean, and I would have traveled before. I would have traveled to different cities in the States, different countries. But it was just the way that was laid out, the way the buildings looked, the character of the buildings, the way that they actually restored buildings and they cherished the cultural heritage and the architecture. That all amazed me. And I came home and I said, I want to do something with architecture. Prior to that, I was like, I want to do law.
Right. So that's why I mentioned it as a defining moment, because you are what you are now, which is dealing with architecture, planning, and so on. And Austria brought that out.
Yeah, and then 2 years after, I went back to Austria to do the Global Young Leaders Program. So there we traveled to different countries and cities in Europe.
Now,
Yes, and then I saw it again. So I saw it in Austria. Then I went to Brussels and I saw it, and I saw it all around. And I was like, this is it. I just like the way that they were pedestrianized streets. The flow of it. It just all made you feel like you're in a fairy tale in some sense. It gave you an ease. It wasn't all hustle and bustle.
The last two people I interviewed on this program, when we were talking about the making of their careers, the last person spoke about wanting to do law, and I was fairly good at it, showed the signs of everything about succeeding there, but went into something which she was more passionate about, which happened to have been writing. Then, prior to that, I was talking to Sean Sutherland, who's a musician who always wanted to do that, but juggled that with academics and so on. There seems to be, in the case of very bright people like yourself, there always seems to be that moment of conflict where I want to do this, but this is also pulling me. And how do you reconcile the conflict that you have in those moments?
That's a really good question. I don't think there is any one moment that I have reconciled that conflict. In my pursuit to do planning and doing planning, I fell in love with other things.
Right.
I've been able to do things in other areas. I mean, although I wanted to do law and I did not get the chance to pursue law fully, I've done projects which allowed me to look at the legal system in terms of planning and planning law. So it kind of works. But when it comes down to it, you have to sit down and have a coming to God moment, where you think of it all. If you're like me, you would write a list.
Right.
So you'd write a list. This is why I want to be a lawyer. This is why I want to do planning. And you kind of...
It gets down to that kind of detail.
Yeah, it gets down to that kind of detail to me, because that's the way I'm an overthinker. So I would generally do lists. But you have to look at what you like. My advice to anybody who might be just graduating from college or just graduating from secondary school and thinking about career, I think you have the time at the community college or in secondary school to kind of examine what your interests are to pursue them. So for me, I did that with a broad range of subjects. When
Did you get any guidance counseling at all? Apart from your parents, because I know they would have been in your head. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm lucky in that light that I have people around me who would have been in both fields. So I asked the question, what was it like to be a lawyer? What is it like to be a planner? What's it like to be an architect? That kind of thing. And also, luckily for me, my dad is a planner.
Right.
So he's in the field. And, I saw it firsthand. He made sure that I became his assistant at a very young age. So I would understand and I would appreciate the profession of planning. I was lucky enough to have Andrew Cummins in my life, and he was an influential person as I was doing law at community college. He would definitely, show me what it's like to be a lawyer.
In fact, not did he just show you, but he had you in sessions,
he mentored.
Sessions at his house, you and another group of,
he
including
mentored
his son, I believe.
Yes,
right?
He would have mentored us greatly.
But systematically, not just ad hoc. I find that fascinating, actually.
It was some of the best evenings of my life, to be very honest with you. I had a great law teacher during my 8 to 4 or 9 to 5 hours at community college. So she was great, but Uncle Andrew took us really in depth. He applied the law in a very local manner that you can understand.
Right.
Because at the time when I did law at the community college, this is a funny story. There was this one case about Boots Pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
Right? And it was supposed to be like a cornerstone case in British law.
Right.
And our teacher taught it to us. We know Boots / whatever. And, but when I got to England and I saw the pharmacy Boots, I was like, Boots!
You recognize it,
Yeah, that is when, it all came into context. But because we did the English law system, some of the cases, they just seem so far away.
Yeah.
But when in the sessions with Uncle Andrew, he'll explain it in a local term that you get it and you say, okay, all right, I understand that now. Break it down for you completely.
But you still became a planner. What does a planner do, Benarva?
A planner does so many things. Town and country planning or regional and urban planning, it's an integrated approach at placemaking. When I say integrated...
Pull up. Placemaking.
Yes.
Tell me, what is placemaking?
Placemaking is about the design of cities, land, because that's what we are focusing on, land. Land is a limited resource.
Okay.
So based on their certain qualities that a piece of land might have that makes it more developable for a certain cause.
Right.
And with planning, we kind of explore those qualities and how it all works and bringing it together for the greater social good. So we would look at the social implications, the environmental implications, the economic implications of a plan. And we would think about how people will react in it. It encompasses things like public health recently, because planning was created to resolve some of the public health issues that were happening in England, where during the time of industrialization and rapid urbanization was taking place. So you had land uses that were causing problems with the community.
Right.
And they were not, how do you do it? The word is on the tip of my tongue, but they were not compatible.
Right.
So you had incompatible land uses happening. So planning seeks to put some kind of order to that.
Yeah. It's funny. Just this morning, I was listening to somebody like yourself being interviewed. An architect, really. But they were talking about rapid urbanization, as you mentioned it, and how it drove poverty levels sky high in, it was Tanzania at the time. And people were caught up in that conflict in Rwanda. And the movement and the settlement of people, and it's created a host of problems, including poverty, driving levels of poverty. You see us in the context of St. Vincent and the Grenadines at risk of that sort of thing. I know we deal with smaller populations, but
but it's happening here. I mean, urbanization, it's a global phenomenon. You cannot say that it's not. It's a global phenomenon. If you look at a map of St. Vincent and you analyze the population of St. Vincent, majority of our population lives to the south. And we can talk about, if you talk in census districts, you'd be talking like the Camden Park census districts all the way to Calico. That houses the majority of our population. And that would mean that the people within that area, they're all dependent on same resources. And they're all working within that space. So how do you make that work? It's approximated that by 2050, more than 80% of the world's population will be living in urban areas. So while it creates problems in the urban areas, it also creates problems in the rural areas.
Yeah, because they're under-resourced by people.
Exactly. And so there's that whole balance of it. So in terms of it happening in St. Vincent, it's already to some degree happening in St. Vincent, and the trend is showing that it will continue to happen because the northern census districts, they all have people are moving out.
But migration, whether it's local or it's outside of your country, it tends to be driven largely by opportunities, where people think that opportunities are for them to make a living, to raise their family, to better the lives of their dependents. And so clearly, if you know what the drivers are and you know urbanization, that sort of concentration is going to be an issue, then what are the mitigating measures, therefore, that you would advise as a planner to stop that?
There are several. It's all about, it could be about strengthening the rural industries. Because, and creating an area where people can where people have access to all their needs, all the resources for their needs, and they see a space for advancement within a community. So strengthening the rural areas and ensuring that communities actually provide a livelihood for its residents. That can also work. And
not just a livelihood, though, because we have to make the difference between subsistence, existence, and
an area for growth. You need to ensure that there's the growth and there's the advancement. And then it also has to do in terms of, I mean, if you look at St. Vincent here, right? The death of the banana industry or the reduction in the banana industry would have driven a lot of people and the booming services industry and tourism industry, majority of that is happening within the South. So people are definitely going to come to the South for better opportunities. So it's all about maintaining the opportunities that would exist within the South in the North. And it's also about looking at the movement of people, how they travel, what they want, what are their needs, the future of it. How does it all go? It's a great balance. It's an interesting field.
It is interesting. And we're coming to the end of the second break, the second segment, sorry. So we're going to take a break. And we spend the next two segments talking about matters within that field, because this is the meat of what you do. And I think you have a lot to offer in terms of recognizing the challenges and also maybe even giving advice as to how we should go about mitigation.
I will try my best.
When we come back. This is Let's Get Down to Business. More with Benarva Browne when we come back from the break.
Isn't it good to know that no matter where you are, you're covered by a company owned by Pensensions that understands your unique insurance needs? At Metrosint General Insurance Company, we've invested 50 years of service to guarantee that you have the peace of mind that you deserve. When it comes to motor vehicle, property, employer's liability, business insurance, and much more, we've got you covered. Our professional and friendly staff understands your needs and ensures you understand your options. Metrosint General Insurance Company.
This is Let's Get Down to Business. Let's Get Down to Business is a collaboration between the Chamber of Industry and Commerce and IKTV. My guest on this profile edition is Benarva Browne. She's a town and country planning consultant. Benarva, we're talking about, what your job does and why it's so important to socioeconomic development, essentially, because you can't just allow things to happen.
No.
It creates issues of public health, poverty, transportation, all these sorts of things that are part of our daily lives that we want to work smoothly. If you just have ad hoc development, obviously, it's going to create serious negative issues.
Yes.
In St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and as we went out on that break, we were talking about the shift from the banana industry, which was mainly rural activity, because that's where our
Prime
lands
agricultural lands are.
right? So, and that was fairly widespread as well. So it wasn't just concentrated in Lauders, Lomans, but it was Georgetown. It was pretty much all over, especially on the Atlantic side of our island. That collapsed, and we're moving, as tourism as a main pillar, and we've seen that as being a southern type development. The south coast of St. Vincent and the Grenadines is already challenged in terms of its concentration of people.
Yes, and
is it going to be
climate.
further challenge with tourism?
Yeah, it's going to be further challenge within the future, and you don't have to even say with tourism. You have the big issue of climate change.
And we're going to talk about climate change as well.
Yeah, you have the big issue of climate change looming over us. I mean, in a situation where a lot of our tourism developments are based along the coast, and they're having rising sea levels and other issues, we're going to have to be able to mitigate against that. Or adapt a policy or adapt to climate change.
Right.
And how we do that is an important part of planning and integrated approach of urban and regional planning.
Right. The whole thing about tourism, though, is that typically it takes place along the coast because tourists come for beaches and.
But that's the tourism product we sell.
Right. So that is the vanilla flavor.
Sand and sea tourism.
Sand and sea. Okay. But the sea is a rich resource as well in terms of what it offers from an entertainment standpoint. Snorkeling, diving, the
Yeah,
swimming,
and it's
sailing, the power
it's a
boating.
huge resource when you look at
Right.
the input of food
Right.
to us as a nation.
So it's a mixed use resource.
Yeah,
right?
it's a vital
What we call
resource.
in the blue economy.
Yeah, it's a vital resource, and the management of our seas, coastal areas, or even our rivers is essential to us maintaining a good balance and maintaining a good lifestyle here.
But the point I was really getting at is that if we and you said it, if we sell the sand and sea tourism and the issue of climate change looming and sea levels rising, surely we've got to be thinking differently. We've got to pull up brakes there and understand that it can't be just sand and sea. For a matter of fact, it has to be with urgent attention, almost something else. What is that something else?
Well, that's what planning tries to help to do. I mean, we can always talk about maintaining the development within our course. But you then look at what other areas can you go into. I mean, we can sell nature as an adventure seeking as well. We can have that adventure tourism. The volcano, to me, it offers great opportunity. Especially now. So we need to make sure that the development that occurs around the volcano and the areas around the volcano is able to maintain and to keep that kind of tourism base.
So you're suggesting that we look at our topography, we look at the natural features, like the volcano would be one. I suppose our rivers or waterfalls, the nature trails.
Yes. And we look at maximizing those as a tourism product. They are already a tourism product, but we need to look at maximizing them and the use of them. I mean, we can't beat the Grenadines in sand and sea. That's a very beautiful part of the world, but we definitely have to look at diversifying.
And when you come to when we talk about the Grenadines, I suppose one of the mitigation methods there is volume control in terms of the number of people that you want to push through there at any one time. I mean, it can't be thousands of people descending. It's going to spoil the resource, won't it?
Well, yes, but we have to look at the volume, and we also have to look at the type of development that occurs, and we have to look at what we're doing to restore our environment as well. That's just as much of it. The restoration efforts that we go into it, the things that we do, even as normal citizens. Because you speak of it in terms of tourism. But let's take it from the perspective as a national wanting to enjoy St. Vincent and the Grenadines for future generations. That's the whole basis of sustainable development. And sustainable development has become like a keyword. You know, you hear it all the time. It's like climate change. Everybody say climate change, sustainable development. But when you look at what sustainable development is as its core, it's about keeping or maintaining and improving our environment and everything for future generations. I say environment, but I mean where we live, where we work, where we play. It's just about maintaining that for future generations. You came and you met trees. You would want that your grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-great-great-grandchildren are able to come into a world where St. Vincent has trees.
So you don't want to recede in forests?
No, you definitely don't. I mean, the COP that just happened, COP26. You heard great speeches. Everybody was applauding at the speeches. But that's what that was about. It was about the fact we need to maintain. The Prime Minister of Barbados, she spoke about, in her speech, she talked about kicking the can down the road and about the big countries doing that, the big pollutants doing that. But locally, we have to look at our actions and think about the actions that we're doing that is just kicking the can down the road. So we're saying, oh, that's not for us to think about. They would resolve that in the future.
Planning, I mean, the field that you prior trading surely has to inform policy making. I mean, I would imagine that's a big part of the advice that you have to offer the policymakers, and you yourself, by virtue of doing that, become a policymaker. Clearly, if we look at greenhouse gas emissions, okay, a population of 100,000 people, we're not moving the needle for the world.
No, we're definitely not.
We do, right?
I mean, all the small island developing states in the world, SIDS as we call them. So we're talking about all the Caribbean islands, all the Pacific islands. They're not moving that needle. The other countries are, but we're feeling the impact.
Right. But it also does not give us
a reason
to not be concerned.
Exactly.
And to do the same thing that we don't want the bigger countries to do.
That was my whole point with the whole kicking the can down the road. We have to look while she says that, and we applaud that for the big international countries, we have to look locally, regionally, individually, even as the family unit, to figure out how you're not doing that.
And pollutants don't just have an impact on temperature, this global warming that we're talking, but it has an impact on the quality of the air, the quality of the water you drink, and so on. So we do need to pay.
Yeah, it has a great impact on the quality of life that every Vincentian can have. And we live in a region that have been described as the most disaster-prone region in the world. And we're sitting like within that sweet spot.
Right.
When you look at hurricanes, we're affected by hurricanes.
Yeah.
We're affected by earthquakes. We're affected by tsunamis.
Yes.
We are an island, so we can be affected. And we're not only affected by natural disasters, we're affected by man-made disasters as well. Something as an oil spill can cause serious havoc on our marine life and life in general. And it doesn't have to be a ship that it's sailing to St. Vincent that spills the oil. It could just be a tanker somewhere in the ocean that causes.
But you get the drift.
Yes.
And it comes and it impacts your whole, some pelagic species get wiped out or at least stunted.
Yeah. Because when I was studying maybe let's say 10 years ago, there's no way we could have imagined what the COVID pandemic would have been doing now to the world or even here locally.
Right.
I mean, 3 years ago, no one would have said, to go into a bank, you have to wear a mask. So you can see that things happen. So you have to become, planning, it has to be reactionary, but it also has to be proactive within its nature.
Look, let's talk about our own lifestyle here in terms of things that we do and how we treat nature and how it impacts, forget the global warming, how it impacts, the quality of life. Look at our mountains, the activities in our mountains. How does that impact what happens downstream, at the foothills? You are a planner, you see it yourself, and I really want you to spend some time here identifying the bad practices that we do and what we should desist from doing.
Bad practices. So we're a hilly country, mountainous country. That's how you describe us. But some of our homes tend to be high on these slopes.
Right.
And you're talking about sometimes it's high density developments. When I say high density, I mean it's a square footage, like a lot of heads on square footage of land. You get the whole idea. So we have that. Then we have the issues related to the way that we build. A lot of our development on ground is not it is not permitted development. That means it hasn't been approved by the planning department. It's somebody just going to build. But while you can see, one person doing it, and when you look individually and you say, I need somewhere to live. So I have to put up my house and this is a piece of land I have. That's fine. But when we collectively adopt bad practices, we kind of collectively adopt destruction.
Yes.
And it becomes a hazard. And it just doesn't become a hazard to you. It becomes a hazard to the other people within the community.
Correct.
Because let's use the mountain as the example. So if I go to the top of a hill and I start to build there and I start to cut down the forest, rain comes, we have a landslide. It's not my house alone sliding down the hill. It's my house sliding on other people's, and you can see the knock-on effect that it can have for other people.
So how does the planning department here, what do they need to do to manage this? Because I'm getting the impression that, things are not how they should be, really. Without pointing any fingers at anybody, but we are where we are. We've got developments in areas maybe where they shouldn't be.
Yes.
We've got houses erected that should not be erected in terms of building codes, etc. How do we roll all this back?
It becomes a major challenge, and that's why I think we all have to accept the responsibility for planning our nation, because it is our nation. And we have to look and take ownership of our individual actions and see what we have to do. But a major way that can happen is through local, regional, and national development plans. I know that this is something that we've never had a national development plan or any local plan being adopted and is in making it full law policy.
Yeah.
So I know the planning department is working at making this happen, but we have to make sure that our voices are even heard within this exercise. I know there's a national development plan draft out, and I know they're asking for comments on it. So it would be great if I can use this as an opportunity to encourage nationals to go and review the documents online. If you see something that you're concerned about, raise it and become an active participant in the planning of our nation.
You're talking about it as it relates to town and country planning.
Yeah. They're doing it. It's supposed to guide development for the next 20 years within our country. So we're talking 2041. So we're talking about that, and you're talking about and just the other areas, you know. And planning, people tend to get upset at planning sometimes when they're doing things in our greater good. You know, we tend to look at it from the individual perspective. We tend to see, oh, well, the man just trying to make $1 and planning come to shut him down.
Yeah.
But when you look at what could be the knock-on effect for his life sometimes and the other lives around him and us as a nation. So we have to kind of take back the individual.
But Benarva, being consistent with administering proper planning codes and you know, disallowing people certain types of development that they want to do for their own personal gain. Consistency has to be a key, because if you are shutting this person down, but that person over there is doing the same thing and he's allowed to operate,
well, that's
you're undermining the
but that's where national, local, and regional plans, national, regional, and local plans come into play. Because with that, planning then goes around, look at the particular uses in an area and allocates land space to this use. So if an area is deemed to be, let's say, naturally beautiful, and that's in a plan, planning cannot then look at a planning application to put a big industrial site that would pollute that area there. So that's why it's important to have these national plans done. And it creates a basis for us or for anybody who's approaching the planning system to approach it with some certainty. So you know, well, this is what is the vision for, let's say, Barley. And my development scheme, my project is in keeping with that. And then you can actually, so then my role as a town planning consultant would be to defend your development within this scheme. And one of the major things that is happening too, development changes the character of a community and of an area, right? And then it becomes, where does the pressure go? So an area that was previously agricultural land and it has been now subdivided to become housing. How does that flow, and how do you talk about incompatible uses when the other areas around it want to remain in agriculture?
So there must be a lot of thought that goes into whatever seems good from a knee-jerk standpoint, probably has a lot of implications down the road, short-term and long-term, that are more negative than the one positive thing that you think you're going to do.
So all of that must be considered.
Right. We're going to hold it there. We're going to have one more segment when we come back from this break. You're looking at Let's Get Down to Business, more with Benarva Browne when we come back from the break.
Keep calm. We're online now. Thousands of local content for your viewing pleasure. Live. Boom. IKTV. Tune in. Get interactive. Get involved with WhatsApp or Instagram. Interact live. Party from home. Subscribe, follow, send us your voice notes. Check us out on Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, or call us live in studio. Be where the world is going. Stay home and connect online. Boom 1069, IKTV. Join the evolution. It's all about you. Connect now.
Isn't it good to know that no matter where you are, you're covered? Covered by a company owned by Vincentions that understands your unique insurance needs. At Metrosint General Insurance Company, we've invested 50 years of service to guarantee that you have the peace of mind that you deserve. When it comes to motor vehicle, property, employer's liability, business insurance, and much more, we've got you covered. Our professional and friendly staff understands your needs and ensures you understand your options. Metrosint General Insurance Company.
This is Let's Get Down to Business. We're into our final segment with Benarva Browne. She is a town and country planning consultant. Benarva, like I said at the beginning of the program, it's really a pleasure having you here. And we're touching on some very important matters to do with lives and livelihood. And, your field is a fascinating one, but also one that cannot do without. I mean, it instructs really how we can continue in a sustained way, and you say sustained development. You talking about, before we went out on the break, the idea of taking what was previously agricultural lands and then cutting them up into building lots and making them available, easily accessible to the residents. Now, to a politician, I use the word again, this may seem as positive to them, positive development. I'm enhancing the lives of hundreds of people here. I'm giving them security of tenure, land that they never owned. All of these are positive things, okay? And they see themselves as, that's what I'm here for. I'm really here for your development, okay? And this is a tangible thing that you have.
Okay.
Right. But how much of that is done just for expediency, really? Thinking about, this is going to win me the next election, or it's going to certainly be a big tool that I can use to win the next election, and not looking down the road as to, is it the right thing?
I can probably speak on how much thinking goes into it, because I'm not in the position to, make that assessment. But what I can say, using that whole example of agricultural land, usually when agricultural land, or scientists over time have developed different categorization for agricultural land. So you have class 1 agricultural land, that's prime agricultural land.
Yeah.
And it goes all the way down. I can't remember all the classifications. But if we as a nation decide to develop majority of our class 1, 2, and 3 agricultural lands, then that puts our food security, our national food security at risk.
Correct.
And yes, we might like to say that, tourism is the way forward or whatever, but we all recognize that agriculture has a strong base in our society and in our livelihood, in our economy, everything. It's essential.
The world is going back to that recognition as well.
Exactly.
Because look at the
supply chains and the problems.
Look at the supply chain issues. Exactly.
Exactly. So you're looking at localized or local development to feed the nation. There was this article I read that said that globalization is what is killing society. And when I read that, I just had to And the points that were brought forward, yes, there's definitely the good of globalization.
Right.
But I totally understand the arguments that were being put forward there, you know. So going back to the point, so we have to look at the future and the future needs, and are we able to meet those? You know, and it's, to me, nothing is worth jeopardizing our class 1 agricultural lands. Nothing. Because when you look at the big international countries, the big developed countries and other areas, they have like more land than we can ever imagine.
But you know,
but you still see the fact that they're running into the issues regarding agriculture. Some have turned towards making agriculture into like factories. You're talking about tall high-rise buildings that are now farms, because that's where the advancement in agriculture is going.
Right. You know, I listen to you and you talk about using prime agricultural lands, and you have to be careful not to turn that into housing development or industrial development or what have you, because once it's gone, you don't have the potential to grow food to feed yourself, basically. The thing about it, though, because it happens over time, Benarva, right? It's an insidious activity. One project does not, in the moment, look as if it's a threat, right? And so we say, okay, yeah, man, it's for the greater good. There's a word that people use all the time now, a phrase.
But you have the cumulative effect when
that's the point.
one and one and one and one.
Yes, that's why I'm saying it's an insidious thing. You know, it happens slowly, but it's going to a bad end.
Yeah, but this is why the whole activity of planning and placemaking is very relevant. So when you sit down and you say, okay, we have 40 acres of land. How much of that is prime agricultural land? You identify how much of that, and you create legislation to protect that land. So then you can then fit in the other developments. You look at where it might be the best spot for housing, schools. And I mean, you have to look at the linkages between them.
Right.
Because, I mean, planning can get you out of a car. And it's not no if or buts or maybe about it. Planning can get you out of a car. You're seeing that that's being done in major cities all over the world.
Are you saying we're too car-centric?
Yes, we are. We are car-centric, and we're becoming even more car-centric.
Right.
And we hear the complaints about the traffic, and sometimes the traffic departments get blamed about the traffic. But how many cars can our roads really take? And do we want to? And then the whole idea is, okay, well, if the roads are crowded, let's build more roads.
Build more roads.
But what are we going to be doing? Are we always going to be building? Shouldn't we be creating urban centers where we can live, play, work, and enjoy it?
Right. And the question of traffic flow is one that rapidly, in my mind anyway, reduces the quality of living. Because if I have to go from Kingstown to Villa and sit for 3 hours in traffic, what a loss of productivity time. You know,
it's a loss of your mood.
My whole mood completely vanishes into something that you won't want to be around me.
And that becomes, and you're not even talking about the environmental impacts. You're still looking at it as on the individual level. As a planner, I have to look at it from the perspective when everybody jumps in their car, what happens to the environment?
Let's go to vending anyway. Let's get off of traffic here because I'm conscious the time is running down.
Yes.
Finish your point. How do you?
Yeah, how you mean, like when you're sitting in that car and you breathe in the smog. I mean, you look at all those industrialized countries, and there are days when they have stay-at-home orders, like in India right now.
Yeah.
There's a stay-at-home order because the atmosphere, the air quality is so poor.
Crap. There are actually apps on your phone now that you can look at the air quality in various cities, and you see China is like never ever in the green, never ever ever.
Yeah, and they report on it. Air quality becomes something like if it's going to storm today in our context, they report on it.
Yeah.
The air quality is at so and so.
Yeah.
I mean, this is something that, and you know the effects that bad air can have on your health.
Right.
We don't have to speak about that, but
Right. So we don't want to bring life in the Caribbean to that sort of level.
definitely not.
Yeah. And this is why planning is important. I'm sure
Yeah.
you can more than justify, just on traffic alone, you can justify your existence.
And right now we have to think about tackling that problem right now. So although the air outside may not be unbreathable, but we have to make sure and think of ways to make sure that we maintain and even improve upon our
Right.
current air quality, and not current air quality, I'm speaking about other things too. It goes right across the board.
Let's look at vending. How does planning tackle the vexed issue of some people complaining that vendors are creating a nuisance, right? And then the vendors wanting to play their trade to make a legitimate living. So, what's the compromise?
Vending is not a local problem. Let's just say it's not a local problem. I know some people see when they think about vendors, they think, oh, but vending is happening throughout the world. It's a global phenomenon.
Yes.
While at MIT, I jumped on the opportunity to study the whole issue of the informal sector. And I did that at a course at Harvard because I was allowed to switch between institutions. So I did vending at, informal activity and the city at a course at Harvard. And I learned some very interesting facts. And I learned that our vending is not very much different than what's happening around the world. Like the common characteristics, we all kind of share that. Majority of vending is done by women. The whole buy and trade. The issue of forced evictions, which is probably not a big issue here as it might be in India and in certain South American countries and areas of China. But it's the way that vending occurs and the way that you deal with it.
Right.
I mean, the global policy on that, on vending, it's all about regularizing it and getting the vendors into different jobs, avenues, or making the business a legal business entity. But vending is something that it affects our space, our cities, and the way how it flows. And it's a touchy issue.
Yeah. Before this program, when we were discussing the World Bank's concept of why vending exists, and because of job opportunities, right? And there's merit there, of course. But I would like to challenge that a bit and ask you that isn't vending also the provision of a service to the people who patronize?
It definitely is. Vending provides, there are different theories about vending. I should just say that. So there are different theories about vending. One theory basically says that along with the legal or the formal sector, vending has to occur to support the formal sector.
It's market driven.
Yes. So
there's a need.
Yes.
The market says this space. But
just that everything within the formal sector is sometimes so expensive and so overpriced that the informal sector kind of holds it up.
Right.
I mean, and I think regardless of what we do, we're not going to be able to do away with vending completely.
What should we though? I mean,
no,
why?
We
that
shouldn't.
Should not be an ambition.
No, we shouldn't. But we need to be able to sit at a table, discuss the issues surrounding vending, get a whole picture of it. So we actually realize why people are vending, what are the needs of the vendors, how can we improve it, how can we create the space for vending to happen within our cities without it causing negative impacts on our cities and even health.
And as somebody in the field of planning, and you look at the social aspect of development, surely the character of a place, it's feel, the way you feel when you visit a city, okay? If it's too sterile,
Yep.
then you create a flat experience.
Yeah, they're different. While reading about vending, there was this paper that I read, and he details all the ills about vending and all the benefits. And definitely one of the benefits of it was the character of the city and the character of the town that vending creates. I know foreigners who absolutely love the Mill Street experience.
Right.
They talk about how different that is. I mean, and when you look in developed nations now, they're even trying to artificially create
Right.
that kind of
The open market.
the open
The bazaar.
market. It's just they're trying to create that kind of street vibe. That street atmosphere. That's what they're trying to create, because right now you have malls that they're malls, but they look like a continuation of the street.
Yeah.
So you're seeing that's happening. Right. So we really have to look into the issues around vending and the way the policy measures are put in place to deal with vending and whether or not they are effective. Because what can happen with vending, you can build a market, but if it's not in the space that the vendors want, you can move them into the market, but they're still going to...
They'll come out.
If
they're not getting any business there, they'll come out.
Yeah, and then you have to also look at it. If you move them, will they be replaced?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Because they go and somebody else says, here's a spot free enough for me. We're coming rapidly to the end. Tell me about this 1.5 to stay alive. It's the temperature marker we're looking at.
In terms of climate change?
In terms of climate change.
So 1.5, we're currently, I think we're at 1.2 now, right? The COVID pandemic, it caused the world to shut down and there was a reduction in carbon in the air. But now that the world is opening up, the UN has said that we're building back worse than we ever were.
So we're not building back better?
We're not building back better. Because we're trying to make up for the lost time. We're trying to keep up with demand. We're trying to meet demand.
Right.
And how that's happening, we're really at risk. So the 1.5, what that becomes now, that we say 1.5 because in our small island developing states, that 1.5 is destruction for us. Yes. Anything above that will mean catastrophic destruction.
Right.
So we say 1.5 to maintain, but we should probably be aiming for less.
So we're already in trouble.
Yeah, we're already in trouble. We say 1.5 for small island developing states like us. But areas like Miami, Shanghai, I think they were saying 3 degrees.
Whoa.
So those areas, they have already determined where
they're giving up the coast. They're going to recede in. Yeah. They're going to go inland. We don't have that opportunity.
Yeah, we don't have that opportunity.
Yeah. And then, of course,
we really have to fight for that 1.5 and stress how important it is for us and future generations.
And of course, the climate events, which are like hurricanes, floods,
Droughts. We often forget that drought is a major.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So
that can destroy our civilization and drive back our development very overnight. Essentially.
And create poverty and all that sort of thing. It's so we're in challenging times, Benarva, and I am challenged basically to curtail this program we've already exceeded the time that I normally allot for it, which is an hour, but it's such an interesting chat. I think I want to tell my viewers as well that you're going to be back here sitting on this side because you are going to help me to host some of these programs.
Yes, you've been so kind. You made the offer. I mean, it's not something that I ever thought of, but I would give it a try. I Hope I can meet expectations.
Oh, you're going to be excellent, and I'm sure people would not want to see me back once they see you. So, Benarva, it's really been a pleasure, having a chat with you on this edition of our profile format of this program. Like I said, I'm happy that you're going to be an interviewer as well, so that I'm really looking forward to that. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot. This has been another edition of Let's Get Down to Business. My guest was Benarva Browne. She is a town and country planning consultant. Do join us the next time the program airs.
Isn't it good to know that no matter where you are, you're covered? Covered by a company owned by Pensensions that understands your unique insurance needs. At Metrosint General Insurance Company, we've invested 50 years of service to guarantee that you have the peace of mind that you deserve. When it comes to motor vehicle, property, employer's liability, business insurance, and much more, we've got you covered. Our professional and friendly staff understands your needs and ensures you understand your options. Metrosint General Insurance Company,